Well, good morning. Thank you all for coming. I'm going to get us started, so I'll try to keep you more or less on schedule for the rest of the day. I'm excited to we don't talk about this enough, faith in the workplace and leadership, and there's 10,000 books published every week on leadership, and there's a million definitions, but for me it's influence. It's moving somebody from point A to point B in their thinking or in their physical location, but it's got to be done in a way where it's in their self-interest, right? Because if it's not in their self-interest, you can only lead them that way once. So what I'm going to share with you is some things that I've learned mostly the hard way. There's a lot of broken arrows in my backside on my journey in leadership. But I hope it's helpful to you, because I want to get pretty practical, based on the Lord kind of taking Scripture and applying it to certain circumstances in my job. But I want to get practical and practical. But more importantly than that, I want to allow at least half the time for what's on your mind. I know what I'm going to say. I want to hear what's on your mind and what your specific questions are, or and get some conversation going around that. So, I guess one of the guys, as I mentioned earlier, that really resonated with me in leadership was Joshua, because he was a general under Moses, trained, but he was undertaking probably one of the greatest ventures historically in terms of moving 2 million people across the Jordan. The food's about to dry up. Logistics challenges. He's a general, so he knows what he's supposed to have. He and Caleb are the only ones that are around that were there 40 years ago that kind of know what they're up against. But he's got people that haven't been fighting. They've been wandering around the desert for 40 years complaining. And he's going up against Jericho's walled fortresses. He's going against people with chariots and superior weaponry, experience. They're fighting all the time. They're armed city-states. And so it's interesting to me that what God tells him is not kind of, where do I want you to go first? Here's how I want you to go. We read a lot about that with David, where he tells him to stop, wait, go. But with Joshua, in the first chapter, he tells him 3 times, be strong and courageous, and then I'm with you. And he's not saying to Joshua, man up, woman up, buck up, but he's speaking into what he sees in Joshua's soul, which is be strong because you are weak, and you know you're weak. You know what you don't have. You know what you need to have to go in and take these cities, and you don't have it. And you're not going to have it. You're not going to have time to get experience. You're going to get experience as you go. And he's also speaking into his fears. He kept saying, be strong and courageous. And then finally says, because I'm with you. And I find that powerful, because those 3 things are essential to any leadership venture you're going to take on, whether it's in your ministry in the church or in the workplace. And when it comes to being strong, he's speaking again into his weaknesses. Joshua knew what his weaknesses were. He knew what he didn't have. And I want you to just kind of mentally go through your circumstances now and think about, what are your weaknesses? There's things, if you're honest with yourself, you know you have deficiencies. It may be knowledge of the situation. It may be your opposition is 7 feet tall and you're David. It may be resources, financial, what have you. But what are some of the weaknesses that you have as you're going into a leadership venture that you've got in front of you right now? And again, if you don't think you have any weaknesses, that is your weakness. So just ask God to reveal to you what your weaknesses are. Yes, sir. Dan.
Mark, what I begin to face now is, as I've gotten older, I'm starting to realize some things and learn things I've never had before, and I feel like, okay, I think we can start implementing some of these things, but then there's the age factor, where all the young guys kind of want to knock you off, so they can get leadership.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, well, I've got some value here, but should I step aside, you know, for some time and just let you guys start there? And I'm kind of hesitant sometimes, but I think, I look at them coming with not enough wisdom and knowledge that they're going to make some tragic mistakes. So
Yeah.
can you address that a little bit?
Yeah, I think,
In fact, both
Yeah.
Moses and Joshua were pretty old when they kicked off.
Very
their-
old guys. Well, I think it's gonna kind of come back to this notion of our business is not our business, our ministry is not our ministry, our job is not our job, it's God's job. And so asking God, where do you want me to be involved? And it's a different answer for everybody, but I've found the Lord leads me to people that are actually hungry and asking. They have the wisdom to know their weaknesses and their fears, and have the wisdom to ask. And then there's people that, you know, I got it. It's a good luck. You know, try not to get run over on your way out there. But so I think that's something that he, you know, as you pray about watching what's going on in your circumstances, who are those people that are interested in open and those that are not? And if they're not, like you say, you can't help them. You know, yeah, the Lord will bring some obstacles perhaps for them to come into. But I think these kind of want to explore these three things: understanding your weaknesses and going into a venture, understanding your fears, and then this notion of "I am with you." Why does he say that? And what does that really mean? And weaknesses, as I said, have to do with known things, and whereas fears tend to be fears feed on the unknowns. Fears have to have unknowns that can conjure up, and you have unknowns in any venture. You don't know how the market's going to respond. You don't know how the competition's going to respond. You don't know how you're going to respond. And then we're going to come back and touch on these. And then he says, "For I am with you." And again, it comes back to I wish I had started this in the first 10 years of my career, of understanding that this was his gig, it was his job. It was, people would need transportation, oil, gas, heat in the winter, if they're never going to fall. People would need clothes, they would need communication. So we have a divine purpose in what God's called us to do. But what he's saying, I am with you. And I found it interesting. You go back to the garden, and the first thing God says to Adam and Eve after the fall is, "Where are you?" I'm in the garden. You're hiding behind some bushes and tea leaves. Where are you? And I believe he's saying that to believers today in the workforce. I am here. I'm in this work. I'm getting this done to unbelievers, but where are you? Are you with me in what I'm doing in your business? Have you even asked me to show me what I'm doing in your business? That takes time of saying, "Father, I'm clueless. Show me where you're at work here this week." And start taking some notes down. Where is he doing things? Who seems to be open to a spiritual conversation? Who seems to have a need? In my case, I ran into these immovable obstacles, and I remember well starting this little book. I'm on my third one now, but we had a situation in Russia where we were trying to take it back a little bit through history. 2011, President Obama and Secretary Clinton said, "We're going to reset the button." Press the reset button with Russia, and actually had a little red button that hit that and said, "We're going to reset our relationships, and we're going to be, allies again." Noble cause. A few years later, things didn't work out so well. Putin's invaded Crimea. He's invaded eastern Ukraine, and he's on his way, and he's looking for somebody to stop him, literally. And he's frustrated because no one seems. He's used to, if there's a force, there's a counterforce, and there is no counterforce. So the West is telling him, "Don't do that again." He keeps going to the next step. "Don't do that again." Well, wisely, the West does finally start to say, impose sanctions on him at a minimum. During this reset phase in 2011, 70% of our business is outside the U.S. at the time. We have to go where the oil and gas is. We don't get to pick. And one of the great unexplored areas in the world is the Arctic. When you look at the top of the globe, that area, and the reason it's one of the great unexplored potentials is because you can't drill there most of the time. So you have to kind of inch your way up. It's covered with ice. And so we signed a deal with Rosneft, the Russian company, and where if we would pay for the seismic and pay for the drilling at a certain point, then we would earn, an X% interest in the block. And these were gigantic structures. The seismic was real sparsely gridded, but the structures were so big you could see it on, even a very sparse grid seismic. So we were interested in seeing what was out there. So there was an area called the Charis, which is, if you look at Russia, and you've got sort of St. Petersburg on the northwest side, there's a Charis. There's a long sort of a isthmus or that sticks out. It's an ancient kind of Soviet and Russian military. That's kind of where their West Point and their naval academy, all that's kind of there, and it's covered with ice most of the year except for about 3 months. And during the summer, the ice will retreat. We'll go, obviously, retreat up to the north. And so we had a rig. We wanted to drill a huge structure there. You got all this oil and gas onshore. You get to the Charis. There's no oil and gas because no one's been able to drill a well there. So we found a way to get our equipment basically in where we would follow the ice as it retreated up to the polar ice cap. We'd have 2.5 months to get our well down and then out because the ice would come back. And if the ice came back and planted the rig there, a lot of bad things happened in terms of well control, getting oil on ice and things. So we during the reset years before he invades Crimea, we have a rig ready. We follow the ice, it's retreating, and we start to drill. And then 2 months in, Putin decides to invade Crimea and eastern Ukraine, and he's basically just taking back what Khrushchev had given Ukraine when it was part of the USSR in the 50s. So in Putin's mind, it's always been part of Russia. We're just taking back Texas. Somebody gave it away out of mistake, but we're taking it back. Well, then there's a new sanction that gets issued that says any U.S. company that's drilling in the Russian Arctic has to cease immediately. There's only one U.S. company drilling in the Russian Arctic, but it's akin to telling a group of surgeons that are doing open heart surgery, walking into the room announcing, "You got to down tools now. Stop." You don't even have time to sew up the victim or the patient. They die. In our case, if we get off, we're drilling a well that they weren't comfortable drilling. You've got all these pressures exposed. You've got oil potential to get up to the surface under the ice, and it's not a Chernobyl, but it's a huge environmental disaster. And we also knew that we were in Russian waters near a Russian military institution, and the truth is, in my view, the Soviets were not going to let us not finish. They had to bring forces onto the rig and put guns to the head of the workers. We were going to finish. So that was a pretty easy decision. It was life over law. Do whatever they tell you to do. We'll deal with the law later. So we're in this situation where he says, the president, again, for a good reason, I'm not being critical, but we're in the middle of this well, and we've got 2 weeks to go. He says, stop. And I don't know if you remember any of the debates, but we've got no influence with President Obama. We're big oil. So our basic case was we needed to ask the president to allow us to finish drilling the well that was specifically targeted at us, do a favor for big oil, do a favor for President Putin and Rosneft, who have been saying these sanctions are worthless. See, we've got, the Americans are helping us here. They don't matter. We're invincible. And do all those favors, and we need that done in about a week. And we've got nobody with any influence or connection in the administration. I mean, at various distant points. there are some people that were there during the Macondo blowout in 2010, so they get the concept of what happens when you have a well control problem. But this is one, as we said, this is an immovable obstacle. We Father, there's nothing will you change his mind to do us a favor, President Putin a favor at his own, to make him look weak? The odds of that are 1 in a million. But we sent some people up there that were going through the thing. Anyway, we got a call that we see the ice starting to come back. And we're within a few days to a week of having to just either get off or just stay there and hope for the best. But we need to get off so we can get the rig. We need to get the well buttoned back up and get off location before we plant the rig there. And I got a call in the middle of the night from our attorney, and he's panting. I said, What happened? What happened? He said, we got it. He was that they had agreed to let us finish the well. That, I don't know. That's a miracle. Now for every 2 of those, there's a no, or just said no. But my encouragement to you is where you are in your leadership role, where he is doing what he does, whether it's ministering in oil and gas or finance or medicine, he is using your hands and your mind and your heart, and he has a mission, and he's looking for you to ask him to move stuff out of the way. And we spend way too much time saying, "Oh, I got it," or "You're not really that interested." He's intensely interested in what we're doing and what he's called us to do, not only for our sakes, but for the people that are lost, that he wants us to be around, to be a light. So just get in this habit of keeping a little book of these immovable obstacles, and I found it helpful first 10 minutes of the day just to go through these. And one by one, like walls around Jericho, walls began to fall. And again, I had several no's. I lost a son. So no, and I still don't know. I don't have a logical reason on why that was a good thing. People gave me verses and reasons why I should be thankful, but I wasn't. And a loss is a loss. A son is a son. But I know God is good. And God has a purpose in it, and I've got to leave it there until I see Him. So that's kind of with your weaknesses. As you look at things where you know you have weaknesses or needs in your leadership, take the time to write those down and ask God for help. It sounds really simple, but but He's looking for you to get involved in what He's doing, and for you to ask Him to move the stuff that only He can move, that He wants to do for His glory. And then finally, in this fear thing, I don't know what you were afraid of as a little kid. For me, it was wolves. I grew up in Jackson, Mississippi. There weren't any wolves within 200 miles of us, but I was convinced that there were wolves that came into the house, especially when it rained, and you could hear the pitter patter of the rain outside, and I could just see their claws coming down on the open floor, the way down the hallway. And I negotiated with my brother for him to sleep on the bottom bunk. So I was in the upper bunk. I figured at least I'd hear him before they got to me. But when my parents would come to the room, and they'd hear us talking and staying up late, and my mom would come in, and you could tell they're like dog tired, and I can relate to that now. But they'd come in and saying, "Okay, what is it this time?" Well, there's wolves. Where are the wolves? They're in the closet. And okay, so then a magical thing happens, of course, when they flip the lights on. And but as these immovable obstacles came up in the unknowns, but you got to know what you don't know about your venture. You got to be honest with yourself about what you don't know and what you're afraid of, that you have no freaking control over. Write those down, and when God's word comes in, it's like it's like flipping the lights on. You see that fear in the light of day, in the light of God. And I'm just going to pass out. I don't know if we've got them. Just some over the last 12 years or so, the Lord's given me for certain situations what I call flashlights of truth. Just words that verses that came to mind when I was dealing with unknowns. That again I had no control over whatsoever. And I'm just going to read a couple of these, and then I want to give us time for some questions and answers. But so those are coming around. I've got a situation where I couldn't get the downsides out of my head of the unknown, and they're totally dominating everything I'm thinking about. And I'm saying, Father, I can't get this out of my head. I'm petrified. Gave me Isaiah 51:12. I, even I, am he who comforts you. Who are you that you should be afraid of a man who will die, and of the son of man who will be made like grass? And you forget the Lord your maker, Lord, who stretched out the heavens, laid the foundations of the earth. You feared continually every day because of the fury of the oppressor. And where, oh, where is the fury of the oppressor? In all your past, Mark, and all the things you were terrified about, where did the oppressor show up? Then I had another one somewhere I thought, well, I've got a really good case here. Got a great strategy, great logic and persuasion skills. This shouldn't be too hard. Piece of cake. Isaiah 55 says, my thoughts are not your thoughts, nor are your ways my ways, says the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. When I have no freaking idea how this is going to get done with all the potential obstacles, though I walk in the midst of trouble, you will revive me. Who are you that you will stretch out your hand against the wrath of my enemies, and your right hand will save you? The Lord will accomplish what concerns me. I'll leave those with you as maybe just a starter or an encouragement, but make your own list about the fears you're dealing with. That you need to get honest with yourself around the things you don't know and what really does scare you. Most leadership ventures by your competitors in the secular workplace will focus on their strengths and some knowledge of the opposition's weaknesses. But the secular world tends to say, yeah, kind of know yourself, be aware of yourself, but there's no practical way of doing that if you don't know the Lord and not one who made you, who knows exactly how you take, who knows exactly what situation you're in. You have a competitive advantage. Access heavenly wisdom, infinite knowledge, and one who has infinite power. And there's a word for us who do our jobs every day as leaders and don't take access of infinite knowledge, infinite wisdom, infinite power. It's fools.
Amen.
We are fools. God's given us, put us in a leadership situation. He's doing a work, and we are not asking him for the simplest of things. And I think he's calling out to say, I'm in the garden, where are you? I'm here today, right now in this situation, where are you? Your mind a million miles away. Get in touch with what I'm doing. Be strong in your weaknesses, know your weaknesses, pray over those immovable obstacles. Be courageous, know write down what you're afraid of, the scripture that goes with those. And I'm with you. Where are you? Am I involved in God? Am I getting involved in his work? Or am I asking him to get involved in my work? And what does that look like? And it's not rocket science. You'll see people that are struggling. You'll see situations where you get a sense only he can solve this. And importantly, you'll see situations where he's saying, stop beating your freaking head against the granite wall, which I heard many, many times. This is a dry hole. This is going nowhere. I'm not doing that. So I'm going to just stop there and give us some time for questions. Anything that's on your mind?
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Is there anything that you really prayed for, got to know from God, and then later saw the wisdom and the benefit of that? No?
Yeah, there were several of those. There were a couple of deals that we really wanted to get involved in. Two. One in kind of Northwest Africa, an exploration deal, and we knew what the competition was. And again, praying for wisdom. Father, this is yours. What would you have us bid? I'm going to obey you. I got one boss. I may have 100 down here, but I got one boss. And so show me. And again, I'm not sitting there going, give me a number. But as people would bring information, inevitably it would steer us, be more aggressive, less aggressive, whatever, but as, knowing that I was asking him and having a peace, and we lost one bid to BP, very, very narrow. It's Northwest Africa, and we thought, this was so obvious, this was going to be an obvious bet since the big, huge LNG resource, and they drilled the mother prospect, the big one, it's called Tiger Shark. Every prospect has a name, I think it's called Tiger Shark, because it was big. And it's so big, it straddled 2 countries offshore, and they drilled it really dry. And we looked at it on seismic, and it looked obvious as the day was long. But I've also been in situations, as I said, where I asked for his help, and the answer was no, and I still, to this day, don't know. Other than I have a piece about doing, the exploration business is 30% chance of success, so you're 1 out of 3. So you're dealing primarily with bad news. But I had a piece around knowing that I prayed about it, and I was listening, looking for, he would use believers, unbelievers, in terms of the data that would come and steerage. And sometimes he would use my boss to say, we ain't bidding this, we're bidding this. That's pretty clear. But, so there are definitely times where my main revelation, which I wish I hadn't taken, as long as it took to get, is how intensely interested he is in what he has us doing. We talk about not work life and family life and all that. It's broader than that. He doesn't tolerate work as something you have to do to earn to provide for your family. He's intensely interested. It is in ministry. The people, you're providing a service, people, and you're keeping people that can't afford energy and keeping their homes warm in the dead of winter. You have whatever your business is, unless it's illegal, there is a godly purpose for it. And he's not, you are Jesus. You are his Jesus in that place. And when I went to Dallas, I thought, okay, now I'm going to be around these guys and share my faith. It was interesting, the people that I thought that needed to hear it were not the people he thought needed to hear it. And but it's getting involved in his work and spending enough time in prayer. That's it.
How do you deal with failure? How do you deal with that? How do you deal with, whether it's public or private, if it's interpersonal relationships or if it's a situation that you just do good work?
Yeah.
How do you deal with that?
Well, that's a great question, and I think I'll just share with you. We're all recovering sinners, right? So for me, I'm a recovering performaholic. To perform to get value. For recovering achieveaholic. If I achieve these things, I'll feel good about myself. I'm a recovering approvalholic. I'm looking for approval. And none of those things, getting approval or performing or achieving, are wrong, but they're a very poor choice of finding value. And so, as the Lord is redeeming my soul and where my value is as his son, that he delights in, I had a hard time with that verse left now where he's delighting in sin. Well, what about when I screw up? But the best antidote for the performaholic is failure. It's facing it, and I recall, as I said, 70% in the base case kind of failure rate. There was a lot of them, and just started writing the blessings of failure, the blessings of bankruptcy, because it removes any source of pride that I had anything to do with, the outcome. It also convicts me of, well, who do you think you are? You don't think you can fail. It was very, very humbling. But there's nothing more humbling than getting and failure in the face of an infinite God and knowing he's okay with it. It doesn't guarantee me 100% success. He's asking me to look to him for wisdom and guidance. And that's a lifelong learning, and it's a very freeing thing to say, I'm not, yes, I have to perform in my job, and yes, I have to achieve, but that's not who I am. And I can perform and achieve now out of a sense of deep contentment and satisfaction and confidence, as opposed to out of a hole in my soul. which is why I spent a lot of my career as a whole.
But how did you deal with the fact that maybe some of your less scrupulous competitors were paying off officials to take advantage of contracts that you wouldn't do?
Yeah, that, great question, Doug. So, and that happened a lot. We had, in different countries had different rules, and in Europe, there are different rules around what we call bribery. And just, those are evolving, but so the silver lining on that was we had to be that much better than them. We had to make our case that, and it was very much around the sophistication of the government. Did they have the understanding to know, yeah, they may get 100K or whatever, 50 or some Mirage jets or whatever, some benefit here, but if they go with Company A can develop this, provide, an incremental $1 billion in revenue. And of course, you gotta deal with their election cycle. It's gotta be something that not only is good for the country, but for them. So it's we had to demonstrate, not with glossy brochures, but why we were incrementally the better choice. And inevitably that came if you were the first one to see it in their country. The first one to see something on regional seismic to say, hey, we think that could be a resource, and go in there. And that was the case in Guyana, where we did some seismic and saw something that was very subtle, 22% chance of success, but it had so we came in, we earned credibility that way. The tough, more difficult ones were in established countries, oil countries like Nigeria, where everybody's been there forever, and we just, it's just one of those things where, we had officials, saying, your competitor does this, and your U.S. competitor does this. And said, well, that's against the law. That's what you want to do? Knock yourself out. And we lost some things, but I think, like the Lord, this is his business. He doesn't do things through corruption, and he accomplished his results without that. And I'm so thankful, because it's so difficult. It made it easy for our employees to say no, because the requests get asked at every level of the ministry and the government, and if they know the answer at the top's not going to be yes, they can say no and get a pat on the back and not I'm ready to go on with that. Once you go down that path, as it's very difficult to draw any kind of line. But it was a real deal. Sorry.
So Mark, at Exxon we had the EATS process,
Mm-hmm.
and it's an annual review for those that don't know. And I was wondering, it's a bit of a piggyback on the last question. What does like your EATS process look like with God, in the sense that how do you know that you're doing your best as a biblical leader and as a leader and a follower of Christ?
Well, I think that how do you know, like in a performance assessment with a company, what does that look like with God as a biblical leader? What does that process look like? And I think it's the same as the other walks of your life. It's that conviction of the Holy Spirit, which isn't a guilt trip. When it's the enemy saying you scum, you shouldn't, blah, 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 but it's this conviction of, yeah, man, I screwed up. Listening to him correct. He's content, as a father loves his son, he's continually correcting. And then rejoicing with him when, in those fractional times where you trusted him and obeyed. But it's a journey of continually trusting, and for me, it's listening. I had a boss many years ago, Lee Raymond. He began to say very, very few things, and I walked in his office, and I think he had the legs of the chairs cut off low because you were looking up, and then he had this big tiger behind him. And he said, I was asking him something, and he said, Albers, I find that I learn a lot more when I'm not talking. Got it. But I think with listening, I'm in an active position of listening to the Lord, and he speaks. He speaks to his word. He speaks through circumstances, through believers. And time for one. Yes, sir.
What shifted in your mind when you began to understand that the Lord really did care about the work that you do? Do you have anything like explicit with that?
Yeah, it made a lot of the grind. Work is a grind. Work can be a grind. Sports are a grind. So it made a lot of that have purpose, you know, that, that it brought up, we were getting criticized all the time because we were American, we were large, and it was oil and gas. And so, but it kind of helped drown out that noise and say there is a purpose to what I'm doing, and it's a good purpose. I'm not part of something evil. And so I think it helped give purpose to the work, and then it helped me think about, okay, well, what is he doing here? And it was a whole lot more than I had any idea he was doing in lives, and just being listening to people with their hearts and asking them how, hey, I'll pray about that. But it made him, it was sort of an ennobling. Yes, there's still a grind, still a workout, it's still a drag, there's bureaucracy. It's like, why do we have to do this? But it had a purpose to it. I'm being told I've gotten 2 zeros, time left.
So one more quick question. How did you, being at your level, obviously performance at work was great and required a lot of time. How did you balance your leadership at work?
Yeah.
Especially when you're working with people who have different values.
Yeah, good question. I'll tell you what I did wrong early on, and then for the Lord. But I found I was spinning a lot of plates, like the plate of being a good worker, the plate of being a good father, a good husband, the plate of eating right, the plate of working out, the plate of reading good books. I mean, if you look at books on Christian men or women, there's like 30 things, you should be doing. Praying this much, you should do it. And so I was spinning so many plates I was dropping, and they were crashing. And I was blessed with a wife that would tell me when things were happening at school that mattered. And no matter where I was in XYZ country, I could call and get a hold. And she made it seem like I was there, I was in Kazakhstan or something. But I think a couple of things. The other thing she did when I came home, you used to flying on a plane and getting served and all that stuff, and come home, it's like, and Mark, you take out the trash. And I'm like 3 stuck toilets. I say, how did y'all live? You had 1 toilet left. And then, clean out the kitty litter on your way. So it helped kind of bring things, but the penny dropped for me around that God's not trying to do a balance. It all is in order in Him. And some days there's a blowout at work, and that's what you got to do. There's a tragedy at the hospital, that's what you got to do. Some days you need to leave early and make that tragedy event. And just being available to that every day and not trying to do a formula. Now, my problem was, God, give me the formula and I'll execute. I say, no, my formula is this. What I want you to do today. What are the 2 or 3 things? You got your to-do list. Write your to-do list at the beginning of the day and then say, Father, what are your A's? Your A notes. These are what I think of A's. What are yours? And inevitably, some would come higher up and some would go lower down. But and you have to set boundaries. I was competing with people that worked longer hours than I did, higher IQ than I had, higher EQ than I had, more charismatic, blah, 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 and so I was literally the David. I was the one, oh, he's still around, and that's it. But that was God's thing, and I knew that. So, but I think it's setting your own boundaries. If you're doing a good job for your company is never, no company that's making money is ever going to come in and tell you you're making us way too much money, go home. You're just not. And you cannot look to the company management for your work-life balance. I get asked that question. You say, management need to set the work-life balance. We can't set the work-life balance. You need to own that. You need to decide, what am I going to do with my weekends? When am I going to be home? When am I going to go work? And pray about it, and stay with it. And what I'll tell you is, because I was working less, after I got some 2x4s between guys, it forced me to be more productive than my competitors who were working 80 hours. And if you're not learning how to do your job in less time, you're never going to be ready for promotion, to handle on more responsibility. So you got to learn to do what you're doing now in less time, be more efficient, not waste. And if we're honest, we all waste time. We grind on problems and do it. But if you don't learn how to do what you're doing in less time, you're never going to be ready for more responsibility. I saw that a million times. Guys that smoke me on. I always worked. We were up there at 5 in the morning, left at 7. But they develop habits of real inefficiency. You're toast later on. Because you have nothing left in the tank when you've already given every hour there is in the day. So there's a blessing around, it's the Chick-fil-A, Father, give me 7 days of revenue in 6. Father, give me 7 days of work in 5. Father, ask him to do that. Help me with this problem, help me get this done more efficiently. And if it's his will for you to be at XYZ event, he will. If it's in it, but it's kind of listening what's on his list. Yes, sir. Sorry. Go ahead.
Hear me. Thanks for taking my
Yeah,
question. I am a ministry leader. More specifically, I lead the prison ministry at my church, Hope City. And one of the reasons, the biggest reason why I'm even in leadership roles, because I'm really good with working out the logistics of making things happen. But one area I struggle in is learning how to just inspire and move people and reach them where they're at, so that to bring them over and care and know that I care, that they're serving. And just you brought up charisma. How would you best suggest overcoming that weakness?
Yeah, I love the example of David. He didn't try to be somebody he wasn't. He didn't try to wear Saul's armor. He got out a sling of stone, and that's what he used. And if you're naturally quiet and thoughtful, don't try to be like Ronald Reagan. Use that to influence people, because leadership is. It's not excitement. For me, it's influence. It's moving somebody in thought from point A to point B. So first, it's spending enough time with the person to know where point A is. Getting in their his or her head around where are you really, and where do you want to go, and then asking the Lord, Father, how can I minister to Joe or Mary or Sue? Where is point B for them, and then following his direction. But it's spent a lot of time around. People will follow somebody that they know is genuinely interested in. And you can't fake it. You cannot fake authenticity. People see right through that. And so if you don't have a love, there's people that irritate the fire out of you. Father, this person drives me up a wall. Father, I'm not connecting with this person. Help me. And we're as opposite as the day is long. That's an immovable obstacle. That's a weakness that saying, Father, help me with specifically seeing, understand where Mary, Joe, or Sue is here and where we need to go, and then putting that on the list and asking specifically. But I would encourage, you're the one that he wants to lead right now. You're his man. And you're exactly who he wants to, nobody else. And so he's, I think it's just listening to the commandment around that and being comfortable. Like you said, you can lead people that won't follow some of the other paths. All right, well, thank you all very much. Yes, sir.